You did not stumble into this message by accident. Before you clicked, before the algorithm served this to your screen, before you even felt the pull to stop and listen today, something older than technology had already arranged this moment. You are not here because you were bored. You are not here because you had nothing better to do. You are here because there is a voice that has been trying to reach you, and it has been patient, and it has been persistent, and today it finally found a quiet enough moment in your life to be heard. God is trying to get your attention, not in a general way, not in the way a broadcast reaches millions of strangers, in a personal way, a direct way, a way that knows your name and knows what you have been carrying and knows exactly how long you have been waiting for someone to say what you are about to hear. And the fact that you are still here, still reading, still listening, even after everything that has happened. To you, even after all the times you thought about giving up and almost did, that staying power is itself a sign. It is not stubbornness. It is not habit. It is a covenant written into your nature that will not let you walk away from your own destiny, no matter how many times the circumstances of your life have tried to talk you out of it. You are one of the chosen ones. And I know that phrase can feel heavy or unfamiliar or even a little strange to hear directed at you personally. You might be sitting with the word chosen and feeling a quiet resistance to it because life has not looked the way a chosen life is supposed to look, or at least not the way you imagined it would. Chosen people are supposed to succeed early. Chosen people are supposed to have doors open for them. Chosen people are not supposed to spend years in rooms that feel too small, carrying dreams that feel too large, wondering if they misheard something somewhere along the way. But stay with me, because by the time this message is finished, you will understand why those words are not flattery. They are a description of what has been true about you for a very long time, even in the seasons when you could not see it yourself. Chosen ones carry a certain signature, not a visible one, not one that makes headlines or earns applause in crowded rooms. It is an internal one, a frequency, a marking that exists beneath the surface of your personality, beneath your history, beneath the version of yourself you present to the world on the days when you are just trying to get through. And there are specific signs that appear in the lives of people who are set apart, people who are being prepared for something larger than what their current circumstances suggest. I want to name some of those signs right now, because if even 3 of these land for you, you need to know what they mean. The first sign is that your dreams have been unusually vivid lately, not the random noise of a restless mind. Actual pictures, recurring images, faces, places, doors, water, light coming through a window you do not recognize. You wake up and the feeling lingers longer than it should. You find yourself thinking about a dream 2 days later, not because it was frightening, but because something about it felt more real than the room you woke up in. Chosen ones often receive communication through the dream space because it is the one place where the noise of daily life goes quiet enough for something deeper to come through. Heaven speaks in pictures when words have not yet found their way to you. The second sign is a frustration you cannot fully explain. It is not depression, though it can feel heavy like that. It is not ingratitude, though people might have called it that. It is a holy restlessness, a sense that what you are doing and where you are does not match what you are supposed to be doing and where you are supposed to be. You look at your own life and feel the gap between what is and what could be. And that gap does not feel like imagination. It feels like distance, like standing outside a room you know is yours, holding a key you have not yet learned to use. That friction is not a flaw in your character. It is a signal that your soul knows your assignment, and it is tired of waiting for your life to catch up. The third sign is that you have been feeling increasingly misunderstood, not just by strangers but by people who should know you. You have tried to explain what is stirring inside you, and the words either come out wrong or land on ears that cannot quite receive them. Conversations that should go deep stay surface. People you love look at you with care but not comprehension, and you have started to wonder if you are simply too much, or not enough, or somehow wired differently from everyone around you. That is not rejection. That is separation. You are being distinguished from where you were, and that process can feel deeply isolating before it feels like freedom. The people who cannot understand this version of you are not your enemies. They are simply not assigned to your next chapter. The fourth sign is that you keep encountering the same message from different sources. A verse on a coffee cup, a lyric in a song you almost skipped, a sentence in a book you picked up randomly, a conversation that went somewhere you did not plan, a stranger saying something that stopped you mid-step because it answered a question you had been holding silently for months. The same idea, the same thread, the same word, appearing again and again like a compass pointing somewhere your mind has not yet agreed to go. That is not coincidence. That is a pattern. And patterns like that do not happen by accident in the lives of people who have been marked for something. The fifth sign is that you are watching people around you move forward into things you have been believing for, and instead of feeling genuinely happy, you feel a complex mix of celebration for them and quiet grief for yourself. You smile and you mean it, and you also ache and you mean that too. That grief does not mean you are bitter. It means you still believe. You would not ache for it if some part of you had not already been shown that it is real and that it is possible and that it was supposed to include you. The ache is not jealousy. It is a prophecy you are still waiting to see fulfilled. You are not broken. You are not forgotten. You are not the person who somehow slipped through the cracks of grace. You are someone who has been marked. You are someone who was never designed to blend in, even when blending in would have been so much easier, so much less painful, so much quieter. You were always going to be the one who felt more, who saw more, who carried more, not because life decided to be cruel to you specifically, but because the assignment on your life required a particular kind of depth, and depth is only ever built through pressure and time. Everything that has felt like delay, like silence, like unanswered longing, those things have been working on you in ways you are only now beginning to understand. The closed doors were not punishments. The long nights were not abandonment. The seasons of being unseen were not proof that you were unworthy. They were preparation. They were formation. They were God's way of making sure that when the moment finally arrived, you would be ready to carry it with both hands and not drop it. Heaven did not say soon. Heaven said now. There is something that happens in the lives of chosen ones that nobody really prepares you for. Everyone talks about the breakthrough. Everyone talks about the blessing, the open door, the moment when everything finally shifts. But nobody sits down with you and names what the in-between actually feels like. Nobody describes the texture of the waiting season from the inside. And because nobody names it, you end up carrying it alone, wondering if what you are experiencing is a sign that something is wrong with you, when in fact it is a sign that something is being built inside you. So let me be the one to name it today. Let me say out loud what you have been living quietly. The first thing that happens in a season of deep waiting is that grief arrives without an invitation and without a clear cause. You will be going about an ordinary day, doing something completely routine, making coffee or driving a familiar road or folding laundry, and a wave of sadness will move through you that has no obvious origin. You will try to trace it back to something specific, and you will not be able to. It is not attached to a single event. It is attached to time, to the accumulation of days that passed without the thing you were hoping for, to the version of your life you had pictured clearly and watched slowly blur. That grief is real. It is not weakness. It is the honest emotional weight of carrying a promise in a season that has not yet shown you its fulfillment. And the fact that you have kept going through. That grief kept showing up, kept believing even with tears you could not explain. That is not small. That is extraordinary. The second thing that happens is that places and people who once felt like home begin to feel unfamiliar. You walk into a room full of people you have known for years and feel a distance you cannot bridge with conversation. You go back to environments that used to comfort you and find that the comfort is no longer there. The music that once moved you sounds a little hollow. The conversations that once satisfied you leave you feeling strangely empty. And you wonder if something is wrong with you, if you have become cold or disconnected or ungrateful for the people who are still in your life. But here is what is actually happening. You are outgrowing spaces that were right for a previous version of you. The discomfort you feel in those rooms is not dysfunction. It is displacement. It is the feeling of someone who has been quietly growing in the dark and is beginning to sense that they no longer fit the container they have been living in. The third thing is the dream. Not always a sleeping dream, though sometimes that too. It is the recurring image that visits your imagination in quiet moments. A door that appears in different forms but is always closed, always just ahead of you, always carrying a sense that behind it is something you were meant to walk into. You dream about it and wake up reaching. You imagine it during the day and feel a pull you cannot name. Some people would tell you to stop dreaming so much, to be more realistic, to be grateful for what is in front of you. But the dream keeps returning because it is not a fantasy you invented. It is a blueprint you were given. And blueprints do not disappear simply because the building has not yet been constructed. The fourth thing is repetition. The same message, the same word, the same theme, showing up in completely unrelated places at completely unexpected times. A word spoken in a conversation that echoes something you read 3 weeks ago. A passage in scripture that matches exactly the thought you were having in the shower that morning. A stranger who says something in passing that answers a prayer you whispered alone at 2 in the morning. When this kind of repetition begins to happen, you are not imagining it. You are being communicated with. Something is writing a message across the landscape of your daily life, and it is using everything available to it to make sure you do not miss the point. I want to speak directly to the pain that lives underneath all of these signs. The sleepless nights are real. The 3 in the morning moments when you stare at the ceiling and wonder how much longer you can hold on, those are real. The loneliness of carrying a vision that the people closest to you cannot fully see or share, that is a particular kind of ache that does not have a simple remedy. The feeling of being misread, misunderstood, overlooked, passed over for opportunities that seemed less deserving, that sits in the body in a way that is difficult to shake. I am not going to rush past any of that. I am not going to tell you that it was all good and necessary before you have had a moment to grieve what it cost you. Because it did cost you. The waiting cost you. It cost you sleep, and it cost you certainty, and it cost you the easy confidence of someone who has never had to wonder if they were on the right path. It cost you relationships with people who needed you to stay the same while you were being changed. It cost you the luxury of small dreams, because once you have been shown something larger, the smaller version of your life no longer satisfies, and you cannot pretend that it does. But here is the distinction I need you to hold on to. There is a difference between being overlooked and being positioned. When something is overlooked, it is missed. It is passed by without recognition because it was not seen for what it was. But when something is positioned, it is placed, deliberately, with intention, in a specific location for a specific reason that will only become clear when the right moment arrives. You have not been missed. You have been placed. The season that felt like you were invisible was actually the season when you were being located, being set, being oriented in the exact direction your purpose requires. The people who were promoted ahead of you, the opportunities that went to someone else, the rooms you were not invited into, those were not your rooms. And the delay you experienced was not a denial. It was a redirect. It was the hand of something wiser than your own understanding steering you away from destinations that looked like your destiny but were not, keeping you available for the one that actually is. You are not someone who was skipped. You are someone who was saved for something specific, and the evidence of that is not in what has come to you yet. It is in the fact that after everything, you are still here, still listening, still holding the thread of belief even when it has felt impossibly thin. If you recognize yourself in any of what I have just described, I want you to do one thing. Go to the comments section right now and type the words "I'm ready." Not because it is a formula, not because it will trigger something mechanical, but because there is power in declaring out loud, even in 2 small words on a screen, that you are not shrinking back, that you have heard your name called and you are stepping forward to answer it. Type "I'm ready," and know that in doing so, you are joining a room full of people all across this world who are standing in the same threshold, in the same season, choosing the same courage. You have been carrying something heavy for a long time, and one of the most exhausting parts of carrying something heavy is that nobody hands you a set of instructions for how to do it without losing yourself in the process. You learn to manage the weight. You learn to keep moving. You learn to smile in the right places and answer "I'm fine" with enough conviction that most people believe you. But inside, in the quiet places where you are honest with yourself, you know that what you actually need is not more endurance. What you need is a way to reconnect, a way to come back to yourself, a way to remember in the middle of an ordinary day that you are not just surviving a season but being shaped by one. So today I want to give you something practical, something you can actually use, not someday when your circumstances are better, not when you finally have more time or more peace or more clarity, but today, right now, in the life you are already living. I want to introduce you to something I call the return protocol. It is not complicated. It does not require anything you do not already have. It does not ask you to be further along than you are or to pretend you feel something you do not. It meets you exactly where you are and gives you a way to anchor yourself back into the truth about who you are and what this season is actually for. The return protocol has 3 steps, and each one builds on the one before it. Step 1 is what I call the gratitude reversal. Most people think of gratitude as being thankful for what came to you. But there is another kind of gratitude that chosen ones need to practice, and it is gratitude for what did not come to you. I want you to take a quiet moment, right now if you can, and bring to mind one thing that you once wanted desperately that did not happen. A relationship that did not work out. A job you did not get. A door that closed on you when you were certain it was supposed to open. A plan that fell apart in ways you did not see coming. Bring it to mind clearly, and then instead of asking why it was taken from you, ask yourself what it protected you from. Ask yourself where you would be right now if that thing had gone the way you wanted. In many cases, if you sit with that question honestly, you will begin to see that what felt like a closed door was actually a rerouting. That what felt like a loss was actually a boundary drawn around your life by something that could see further down the road than you could. The gratitude reversal does not erase the pain of what did not happen, but it begins to reframe the narrative. It shifts you from the position of someone who was denied into the position of someone who was protected. And that shift matters because the story you tell yourself about your past determines the expectations you carry into your future. Step 2 is what I call the present tense declaration. After you have practiced the gratitude reversal, I want you to speak one sentence out loud. Not in your head. Out loud, even if your voice is quiet, even if you are alone in your car or your kitchen or your bedroom at the end of a long day. The sentence is this: I am not behind. I am exactly where I am supposed to be, moving toward what has already been prepared. For me, say it even if it feels unfamiliar. Say it even if a part of you is not fully convinced yet. There is something that happens when a chosen one speaks truth into their own atmosphere. The words do not have to feel completely true for them to begin working. You are not lying to yourself. You are training yourself to see from a higher vantage point than the one your circumstances have been offering you. The present tense declaration is a small act of faith, But faith was never measured by its size. It was always measured by its direction. And when you speak those words, you are pointing yourself in the right direction, one sentence at a time. Step 3 is the 7-minute stillness. After you have practiced the gratitude reversal and spoken your present tense declaration, I want you to give yourself 7 minutes of intentional silence. Not the silence of distraction, not background noise with the volume turned low, but actual stillness. No phone, no music, no input of any kind. Just you and your breath and the space that opens up when you stop filling every moment with noise. 7 minutes is the amount of time it takes for the noise of your outer world to begin to settle enough that you can hear what is already moving in your inner world. Most people never give themselves 7 minutes of actual quiet. They are afraid of what they might hear or feel or remember. But chosen ones cannot afford to stay disconnected from that inner space, because that is where the clearest communication happens. That is where the next step becomes visible. That is where the answer to the question you have been carrying finally has enough room to surface. I want to be honest with you about something. 7 minutes of stillness sounds simple, and in practice it can feel like one of the hardest things you do all day. Your mind will bring up the unfinished list. Your body will want to check the phone. A thought will arrive that feels more important than sitting quietly, and you will be tempted to follow it. But if you stay, if you give yourself those 7 full minutes, without filling them, something begins to happen in your brain and in your body that science has started to catch up with, and that chosen ones have always known to be true. The stillness is not empty. The stillness is where activation happens. And that brings me to something I want to share with you, because it connects directly to what these 7 minutes of daily practice can open up in you. It is not separate from the spiritual conversation we have been having. It is the science underneath it. There are people who have spent decades studying what happens in the brains of people who practice intentional stillness and focused internal states. And what they have found is both remarkable and, for a chosen one, completely unsurprising. Because what science has discovered is simply the language underneath something your spirit has always known. I will tell you more about what that research revealed and why it matters specifically for you in just a moment. But first, take a breath. Practice step 3 right now if you can. Give yourself even 2 or 3 minutes of quiet before we continue, because what comes next will land differently in a still mind than it will in a busy one, and you deserve to receive it at full depth. There is a reason chosen ones have always felt like they operate on a different frequency than the people around them. Not better, not superior, different. Like a radio station broadcasting on a band that most receivers are not tuned to pick up. You have felt that difference your entire life, in the way you process things more deeply than others seem to, in the way you sense things before they happen, in the way room can shift and you feel it before anyone else names it. That is not imagination. That is not oversensitivity. That is a real neurological signature that researchers have begun to identify and measure, and its name is gamma. Chosen ones carry a specific frequency. Researchers call it gamma. It is the highest measurable brainwave state, operating above 40 Hz, and it is associated with what scientists describe as peak cognitive performance, heightened intuition, accelerated pattern recognition, and what some researchers have called the eureka state, that moment when everything suddenly connects and a solution appears not through effort but through clarity. Gamma is the frequency of breakthrough. It is the frequency of people who see what others miss, who solve what others cannot, who carry a creative and intellectual capacity that seems to exceed what their circumstances should have produced. And here is what is significant for you specifically. Gamma does not operate alone. It works in concert with a deeper wave called theta, the wave that governs intuition, deep learning, emotional processing, and access to the subconscious mind. Children operate in theta almost continuously, which is why they learn so rapidly and why their creativity is so unconstrained. As we grow older, the demands of daily life, the noise, the pressure, the accumulation of responsibility and disappointment gradually suppress theta activity. The brain shifts into beta, the state of stress and surface-level thinking, and stays there. And when theta is suppressed, gamma cannot fully activate. The frequency that was always yours becomes harder to access. Not gone, just buried under years of noise. This is what a neuroscientist named Dr. James Rivers spent more than 30 years studying. Trained at MIT, with research connections to NASA, Dr. Rivers dedicated his career to one central question. Why do some people seem to access a state of extraordinary mental clarity and creative power almost naturally, while others, equally intelligent, equally capable, struggle to access that same state no matter how hard they try? What he discovered over decades of research, studying thousands of individuals across different backgrounds and circumstances, was not a difference in intelligence or discipline or even genetics. It was a difference in brainwave access. The people who consistently performed at the highest levels, who solved problems elegantly, who seemed to carry a kind of inner knowing that guided them toward the right decisions, those people had measurably higher theta and gamma activity during their periods of focused rest. And crucially, that activity could be intentionally restored, even in people who had spent years operating in a suppressed state. The mechanism Dr. Rivers identified is called brainwave entrainment, and the science behind it is elegant in its simplicity. The brain has a natural tendency to synchronize with rhythmic external frequencies. When you expose the auditory system to carefully calibrated sound patterns, the brain begins to mirror those patterns, gradually shifting its own electrical activity to match the incoming frequency. This is not a new discovery. Monks and meditators have been using sound and rhythm to alter consciousness for thousands of years. What Dr. Rivers did was take that ancient knowledge and apply modern neuroscience to it, identifying the precise frequencies, the exact combinations of binaural beats and isochronic tones that most effectively guide the brain from its default stressed beta state back into the theta-gamma activation. That is its natural home when it is functioning at its fullest capacity. The result of that research is a 7-minute audio program called the Genius Wave. 7 minutes because that is the duration Dr. Rivers found to be optimal. Long enough for the brain to complete a full entrainment cycle. Short enough to be practiced daily without adding burden to an already full life. You do not need to meditate. You do not need to have any prior experience with mindfulness or breathwork or any spiritual practice. You simply listen, with headphones if possible, and allow the precisely engineered sound to do what it was designed to do. Guide your brain back into the frequency that chosen ones carry naturally, back into theta, back into gamma, back into the state where clarity is not something you chase but something you inhabit. I want to share something with you that came from one of the people who used the Genius Wave in a season that sounds a great deal like the one you may be in right now. Her name was Maya. She had been going through what she described as 14 months of complete mental fog. She was not in crisis in the dramatic sense. She was simply not herself. Her sleep was broken. Her focus was gone. The things that used to come easily to her, creative work, clear decisions, a sense of direction, had all become effortful and distant. She started using the Genius Wave simply because someone she trusted recommended it. She told Dr. Rivers afterward that the first thing she noticed was not a dramatic transformation. It was a quieting. After the first session, something in her nervous system that had been running at a constant low-level hum simply went still. She slept that night in a way she had not slept in over a year. And the following Monday, she received a phone call she had been waiting and hoping for across many months. She did not attribute the call to the audio, but she said that for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to receive it. Her mind was clear enough, her spirit was calm enough, and her inner frequency was open enough to Meet the opportunity when it arrived. I know that some of you are thinking that $39 is not nothing, and I want to acknowledge that thought directly because it is a valid one. You are not wrong to notice the number. You are not wrong to feel the weight of any financial decision, especially in a season when resources have already felt stretched. That is a real feeling and it deserves to be honored, not dismissed. But I also want to offer you a different frame. The question is not whether $39 is significant. The question is what you are willing to invest in reactivating the frequency that was always meant to be yours. The question is what it is worth to you to stop fighting your own mind and start moving with it. The Genius Wave is normally priced at $49. Through the link in the pinned comment below, it is available today for just $39. It comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, which means you have 3 full months to experience what it does in your life. And if it does not meet you where you are, you pay nothing. There is no risk in the direction of yes. The only risk is in continuing to operate below the frequency you were designed for. One thing I want to say clearly: there are imitations and unauthorized versions of this program circulating online. Please do not purchase from any source other than the single link in the pinned comment below. What you receive through that link is the original, clinically informed program that Dr. Rivers developed. Anything else is not what you are looking for and will not produce what you are hoping for. And I want to be transparent with you about something else. The pricing available through that link is not permanent. The $39 access point is part of a limited offering, and when it closes, the standard price returns. I am not telling you this to manufacture pressure. I am telling you this because if something in this message has already said yes inside you, I do not want logistics to be the reason you delay a decision your spirit has already made. Your frequency has been waiting long enough. The tool that can help restore it is available right now through the link in the pinned comment. That is where to find it. That is the only place I trust you to go for it. Before we move forward, I want to stay here for just a moment longer, because what I am about to say next requires a certain kind of honesty that most messages skip past in their rush to get to the good news. And you deserve more than a message that only tells you the beautiful part of the story. You deserve someone who will sit down in the hard part with you before asking you to stand up and move forward. So that is what I am going to do right now. The waiting cost you something, and I do not want to rush past that. I do not want to reframe it too quickly or wrap it in language that makes it sound more elegant than it felt while you were living it. Because the people who have been in a long season of waiting know that it is not poetic from the inside. From the inside, it is just hard. It is just long. It is just the particular kind of tired that comes not from physical exhaustion, but from the sustained effort of holding on to something you cannot yet see, day after day, in a world that keeps asking you to show proof of what you believe. And you have been showing up to that demand, quietly, privately, without recognition, for longer than most people would have lasted. So let me name what the waiting actually took from you, not to reopen wounds, not to pull you backward into a grief you have been working hard to move through, but because you have been carrying these losses in silence for too long, and something in you needs to hear that they were real, that they mattered, that you are not dramatic or ungrateful for grieving them. Grief is not the opposite of faith. Grief is what happens when someone who believes deeply also feels deeply, and you have always felt deeply. That is part of what makes you who you are. The waiting took relationships. There were people who could have been built into the foundation of your life during these years, friendships that could have gone deeper, a partnership that could have grown into something steady and sustaining, connections that could have been forged in the fire of shared experience. Instead, you were in a different kind of fire, a private one, and the isolation of that fire made it difficult to reach across the distance to others and difficult for others to reach across to you. Some relationships did not survive the season. Some people could not wait with you, and so they moved on, and you had to let them go, and the letting go cost you more than you have allowed yourself to admit. There were evenings when the absence of those people sat heavier than any physical weight. There were celebrations. You attended alone that you had once imagined sharing. And you smiled through those moments because you are the kind of person who smiles through things. But underneath the smile was a loneliness that had no simple name. The waiting took momentum. There were places your career could have gone if the path had been clearer or the doors had opened sooner. There were opportunities that appeared at moments when you were too depleted to meet them with the fullness they required. There were seasons when you watched people with less preparation and less depth move into positions you had been quietly preparing for, and you had to find somewhere to put the confusion of that, somewhere to store the question of why someone who had been faithful for so long was still standing in the same place while others who seemed less ready were being handed what you had been building toward. That confusion is not jealousy. It is a legitimate question that deserves a real answer. And you will get one, but not yet. First, we stay in the honest place. The waiting took your freedom to dream out loud. Somewhere along the way, you stopped sharing the large version of your vision with people. Not because you stopped believing it, but because you had been met with enough skepticism, enough well-meaning but deflating responses, enough of the small smile that people give when they are trying to be kind, but do not really believe what you are saying, that you learned to keep the biggest parts of your dream private. You built a smaller public version and kept the real one inside where it could not be questioned or diminished. And that private keeping, while necessary for your own protection, was also lonely in a way that is difficult to describe. Dreams are meant to be spoken into community. They grow in the hearing of trusted witnesses, and the years of holding yours alone, of nurturing something in secret that was meant to be shared, wore something down in you that you have not yet had the chance to rebuild. The waiting took your trust in yourself. This one is perhaps the most painful to name, and I want to name it carefully because it matters. After enough time in a season that does not yield, after enough prayers that seem to go unanswered, after enough moments of certainty that were followed by disappointment, something begins to happen to your inner compass. You start to question whether you heard correctly. You start to wonder if the clarity you once felt was real, or if you constructed it out of hope and desire, and the very human need to believe that your life has a direction. You start to second-guess the very instincts that were given to you as tools for navigating your purpose. And that self-doubt, once it takes root, does not stay contained to the big decisions. It spreads into the small ones. It makes you hesitate where you once moved freely. It makes you ask for permission where you once walked with confidence. It makes you qualify your own opinions and shrink your own presence and apologize for taking up space in rooms where you were always meant to stand fully. And the version of you that exists on the other side of that erosion is quieter and more careful and more afraid than the one who started this journey. And you miss who you used to be before the waiting made you smaller. The waiting took your sense of time. There is a particular disorientation that comes from living in a long season of preparation without a visible end date. You lose track of where you are in the story. You cannot tell if you are near the beginning or the middle, or whether you missed a turning somewhere and ended up somewhere you were never supposed to be. Other people seem to know where they are in their lives. They have markers and milestones and a clear sense of progression. But you have been in a landscape without those markers, and navigating without them has cost you a kind of inner steadiness that you have been trying to rebuild for a long time. I want to sit in all of that with you before I say anything else, because Joseph sat in a pit, and then he sat in a prison, and the text does not rush past those years. It does not skip from the coat of many colors to the throne room in Egypt as though the time between was a minor inconvenience, a brief narrative gap to be summarized in a sentence. Those years were real. The confusion was real. The silence of heaven during the years in the pit and the prison was real. The dreams he had been given as a young man must have felt impossibly distant during the years when the evidence pointed only to their failure. And Joseph did not have the benefit of knowing how the story ended while he was living in the middle of it. He did not have a narrator telling him to hold on because chapter 41 was coming. He simply had the character that had been built into him, and the faithfulness to remain who he was in a place that had every reason to change him into something smaller and more bitter and more closed. I am not going to tell you yet what happened after the pit and the prison, because right now we are in the part of the story where the character is still in the dark, still waiting, still holding on without a visible reason to. And that part of the story deserves to be honored in full before we move to what comes next. Because the next part only means something if you have been willing to feel the full weight of this. Part first. You have been Joseph in the pit. You have been faithful in rooms that offered you no applause for your faithfulness. You have maintained your integrity in seasons when compromise would have been so much easier and nobody would have blamed you for it. You have kept the dream alive in your chest through years of circumstances that argued against it every single day. You have shown up to your own life even when showing up felt like the hardest possible thing to ask of yourself. And none of that is small. None of that is ordinary. That is the particular kind of strength that only gets forged in the particular kind of furnace you have been living in. And it does not go to waste. It never goes to waste. The losses were real. The cost was real. And you are allowed to grieve it fully, completely, without rushing yourself toward a resolution you are not yet ready to feel. Because what is next is going to require a wholeness in you, a settledness, a completed sense of your own story that can only come from having looked at the hard parts honestly and not flinched away from them. You are not weak for having been worn down. You are not faithless for having wondered. You are not broken for having grieved. You are human. You are chosen. And those two things are not in contradiction. They are, in fact, the exact combination that your assignment has always required. There is a word that the ancient Greeks used for time that most modern languages have lost, and losing it has cost us something significant in the way we understand our own lives. The word is kairos, and it stands in direct contrast to the other Greek word for time, which is chronos. Chronos is the time you measure. It is the time on your phone screen when you wake up at 3 in the morning. It is the number of years you have been waiting, the number of months since the last thing shifted, the number of days since you last felt certain about where you were going. Chronos is the time that accumulates and presses down on you with the weight of its own passage. It is the time that makes you feel late. It is the time that whispers that you should be further along by now, that others your age have already arrived at places you are still moving toward, that the window you were waiting for may have already closed while you were not looking. But kairos is something entirely different. Kairos is not measured in units. It cannot be tracked on a calendar or counted in days. Kairos is the time that arrives when everything that needed to happen before a moment has finally happened. It is the fullness of time, the ripeness of a moment that has been quietly assembling itself beneath the surface of your visible life, drawing together all the threads of your experience, your pain, your formation, your faithfulness, into a single point of convergence that, when it arrives, cannot be mistaken for anything other than what it is. Kairos is not a reward for effort. It is not something you earn by waiting long enough or believing hard enough or being good enough. It is an appointment. It was written before you were born, and it has been moving toward you with the same steady certainty with which seasons move, regardless of whether the ground can see what is coming. You have been living in Chronos time, measuring your life by the clock, counting the distance between where you are and where you thought you would be. And that measuring has been breaking something in you, because Chronos time will always make a chosen one feel late. It will always make a person whose assignment operates on divine timing feel as though they are running behind a schedule they were never actually given. The confusion is not because you are behind. The confusion is because you have been measuring the wrong kind of time. You are not late. You are in Kairos. And Kairos does not announce itself with a countdown. It announces itself with a convergence, with a sudden sense that everything is beginning to connect, with a message like this one finding you on an ordinary day and landing somewhere inside you with a weight that tells you it was not accidental. That convergence is not coincidence. It is the sound of Kairos arriving. And now I want to introduce you to a second ancient concept, because it speaks directly to what your years of waiting have actually been doing inside you, even when you could not feel it happening. In the Hebrew language, there is a word translated most often as wait in English. The word is kava, and the English translation is accurate but incomplete because it captures only the surface of what the word actually means. Kava does not simply mean to sit and wait for something to arrive. At its root, kava means to bind together, to twist, to braid, like the making of a rope where individual threads that are weak on their own are wound around each other under tension until they become something that can bear extraordinary weight. When the ancient texts say, "Those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength," the word being used is kava, and the image is not of someone sitting passively in a room, staring at a door. The image is of a rope being made, of something being wound tighter and tighter, not in a way that damages it, but in a way that fundamentally changes its capacity. The tension of the waiting is the mechanism of the strengthening. The years that felt like nothing was happening were the years when the threads of your character, your faith, your resilience, your depth, your capacity for compassion, were being wound together under pressure into something that can now bear the weight of what is coming. Think about what the waiting has braided into you. It has braided in empathy, because you have suffered in ways that give you access to the suffering of others. It has braided in discernment, because you have had to learn to navigate without easy answers, and that navigation has sharpened your ability to read situations and people with a clarity that those who have not been through difficulty simply do not have. It has braided in patience, not the passive patience of someone who has given up, but the active patience of someone who has kept the vision alive through every season that argued against it. It has braided in authority, the kind that does not come from a title or a position, but from having been tested and having held. You are not the same person you were when this season began. You are not thinner or more fragile or more diminished than you were. You are a rope, and ropes are not made in comfort, they are made in tension. You were not delayed, you were being assembled. And this assembly has been happening in what I want to call the wilderness season. Every chosen one passes through a wilderness, not as a punishment, not as evidence that they took a wrong turn or missed their moment. The wilderness is a specific and necessary phase of preparation that appears in the life of every person whose assignment is significant enough to require it. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before he stood before Pharaoh. David spent years running from Saul, hiding in caves, leading a band of broken and desperate men before he was crowned. The wilderness is where the things that cannot survive the weight of the calling get stripped away. The dependencies that would have made you fragile at the top. The need for human approval that would have compromised your integrity under pressure. The fear of man. That would have caused you to shrink at exactly the moment your purpose required you to stand fully. The wilderness does not take from you. It removes from you. And what it removes was always going to have to go before you could carry what is next. The wilderness is not a punishment. It is a purification. And you are not still in it because you failed. You are coming out of it because the purification is complete. I want to speak now to the appointed time, because this concept carries a specific weight for someone who has been in a long season of believing without seeing. In the ancient understanding, there is a time that has been set, not suggested, not hoped for, set, appointed with the same certainty with which the sun is appointed to rise. And the nature of an appointed time is that it does not respond to human doubt or human delay or human logic. It moves according to its own internal calendar, one that was written before you were born and will not be rewritten by the years that have passed, or the prayers that seem to go unanswered, or the moments when you almost stopped believing entirely. What God has appointed, delay cannot cancel. What has been set in motion at the level of divine timing does not stop moving simply because you cannot see it moving. The river does not stop flowing because the surface appears still. The seed does not stop growing because the ground above it shows no sign of what is happening beneath. And the appointed time does not stop approaching simply because your chronos calendar has run out of the patience it promised to give itself. You are not watching your moment pass you by. You are standing at the edge of it, and the convergence you are beginning to feel, the sense that something is shifting, that the atmosphere around your life is changing in ways you cannot yet name but can somehow sense, that is not wishful thinking. That is the appointed time making itself known. That is Kairos breaking through the surface of your chronos existence and announcing that the assembly is finished and the appointment has arrived. You are not delayed. You are not forgotten. You are not passed over. You are being wounded and braided and tested and purified and positioned. And the wilderness that felt like it would never end was always going to give way to this. To the moment when the rope is finally complete and the door it was always meant to open is finally in front of you. You are not behind. You are exactly on time. Kairos time, the only time that has ever mattered for someone like you. Something is shifting. You may not have the language for it yet, and you may not be able to point to a single visible piece of evidence that proves it, but something in you already knows it is true. There is a difference in the atmosphere around your life right now compared to 6 months ago, compared to a year ago, compared to the deepest point of the season you have just been walking through. It is subtle. It is not loud. It does not announce itself with fanfare or with sudden dramatic change. But it is real. And part of what this message is here to do is to give you the language for what you are already beginning to sense, so that you do not miss it when it arrives in its fullness because you were not watching for the right things. I want to tell you about 3 specific areas where the shift is already in motion. 3 domains of your life where what has been held is beginning to be released. And I want to describe them in enough detail that when you begin to see the signs, you will recognize them for what they are rather than explaining them away or dismissing them as coincidence or being too afraid of disappointment to let yourself believe that something is actually changing. The first area is your inner world, the landscape of what you feel and sense and know on the inside. And the shift that is coming here is one of clarity. For a long time, your inner world has been characterized by a kind of fog. Not confusion exactly, but a thickness. A sense that the signal you were once receiving so clearly had become muffled somehow, as though something had come between you and your own deepest. Knowing, you would sit in prayer or in stillness, and instead of that familiar sense of contact, of connection, of being heard and held and guided, you would find only quiet. And you would wonder if the quiet meant absence. But here is what I want you to understand about that kind of inner silence. It was never absence. It was gestation. It was the particular kind of quiet that precedes emergence, the way a seed is. Completely silent in the ground and completely alive at the same time, gathering everything it needs for the moment when it breaks through the surface. The clarity that is coming to your inner world will not arrive as a dramatic vision or a sudden overwhelming certainty. It will arrive as a gradual lifting, as a morning after a long night where the light comes in slowly, gently, until you look around and realize you can see again. You will begin to know things with a settledness you have not felt in a long time. Decisions that have been impossible will begin to feel navigable. The question of your direction, the one you have been carrying and turning over and setting down and picking up again for months or years, will begin to find its answer not through a single moment of revelation, but through a series of small, clear, unmistakable steps that present themselves one at a time. Do not wait for the whole staircase to be visible before you take the first step. The first step is the only one that needs to be clear right now, and it is becoming clear. What you should not do in this season of inner clarity is rush it. Do not force the knowing before it is ready to arrive. Do not fill the space where the clarity is forming with noise and activity, and the frantic energy of someone who has been still for too long and is suddenly desperate to move. The clarity needs the same kind of intentional quiet that you practiced in the 7-minute stillness from earlier in this message. It needs you to be available to receive it. Stay available. Stay quiet enough to hear the still small voice when it speaks, because it is speaking. It has never stopped speaking. You are simply becoming able to hear it again. What you can trust in this season is that the next right step will be shown to you before you need to take it. Not the whole map, not the full plan, not the complete picture of where this is all going and how it is all going to unfold. Just the next step. And that is enough. That has always been enough for someone who has learned, through the long wilderness season, to walk by faith rather than by sight. The second area where the shift is in motion is your relational world. And this one requires particular attention because it will not look the way you might expect a blessing in relationships to look. The first movement in this area will not be addition. It will be clarification. People who are not assigned to your next chapter will begin to naturally create distance. Not through conflict necessarily, not through dramatic falling out or painful confrontation in every case, but through a gentle, organic drifting that you will notice and perhaps feel sad about, and then feel a quiet peace about that will tell you everything you need to know. Not every relationship that ends in this season is a loss. Some of them are completions. Some of them served a specific purpose for a specific season, and that season is now complete. And the love and gratitude you carry for those people does not have to disappear simply because the assignment you shared with them has fulfilled itself. After the clarification comes the connection. People who are aligned with where you are going will begin to appear in places you did not look for them. A conversation that goes deeper than expected. An introduction that carries a weight of significance out of proportion to its ordinary circumstances. A person who seems to already understand something about you that you have never had to explain, as though they were briefed on your story before you met. These connections will feel different from the connections you have made in previous seasons. They will feel less effortful, less like performance and more like recognition. Like finding people who speak the same language after years of living in a country where you could only approximate the words. What you should not do in this relational season is hold on too tightly to what is completing. Do not spend your energy trying to revive connections that have served their purpose. Do not shrink yourself back into a version that fit those spaces simply to avoid the discomfort of outgrowing them. The people who are meant to walk with you into the next chapter cannot find you if you are still standing in the doorway of the last one, looking backward. What you can trust is that you will not be alone in what is next. The isolation of the wilderness season was specific to that season. It was necessary for the formation it was producing, but it is not your permanent condition. Community is coming. Chosen ones are not designed to walk their assignment in isolation. They are designed to find each other, to recognize each other, to form the kind of bonds that are forged in shared purpose rather than mere shared proximity. That community is assembling itself around your life right now, even if you cannot see all of its members yet. The third area where the shift is in motion is what I want to call your resource landscape. And I use that word broadly because I am not only talking about finances, though that is included. I am talking about the full range of what you need to fulfill your purpose. Energy, ideas, opportunities, open doors, the right information at the right time, access to people and places and platforms that your assignment requires. All of this is part of the resource landscape, and the shift that is coming here is one from striving to receiving. For a long time, you have been working harder than the results justified. You have been pushing against resistance that should not have been as heavy as it was, and carrying loads that should not have required as much of you as they did. That is the characteristic experience of someone who is operating in a season before alignment. But alignment is coming. And when it arrives, the same effort that used to produce so little will begin to produce in proportion to the fullness of what was always inside you. The doors that open in this season will not require you to break them down. They will open because you are the right person, in the right place, at the right time, which is the only combination that ever truly opens a door. What you should not do in this season of resource shift is allow the old striving patterns to follow you into the new territory. When the door opens, do not run through it in panic as though it might close again before you get everything you need. Walk through it with the settled confidence of someone who knows that what is on the other side was prepared specifically for them and is not going anywhere. The abundance that is coming to you is not accidental and it is not fragile. It was appointed, and appointed things do not disappear when you reach for them. If you are feeling the truth of what I am describing in any one of these three areas, if something in your spirit is saying yes to the inner clarity, or yes to the relational shift, or yes to the resource alignment that is coming, I want you to go to the comment section right now and type the words I receive. Not as a transaction, not as a formula that triggers something automatic, but as a declaration from your own spirit that you are open, that you are not going to talk yourself out of what you are sensing, that you are willing to let the appointed time arrive without arguing it back into the future. Type I receive, and mean it with every part of you that has waited this long and is finally ready to stop waiting and start walking into what was always yours. You have come a long way in this message, and I do not mean the distance of time or the number of words you have listened to. I mean the distance inside, the willingness it took to stay with the hard parts, to let the grief of the waiting be named without rushing it toward resolution, to sit with the ancient concepts of kairos and kava, and let them reframe what these years have actually been doing in you, to feel the three areas of shift beginning to stir, and to choose to believe them rather than arguing them back into uncertainty. That willingness is not small. That is the movement of someone who has decided, perhaps not loudly or dramatically, but deeply and firmly, that they are ready to step across the threshold they have been standing at for so long. And so before we move into the final stretch of this message, I want to do something specific for you. I want to give you a name, not a replacement for the name you were born with, but a descriptive name. The kind of name that tells the truth about who you have become through everything you have been through, and who you are stepping into being as this season completes itself and the next one begins. The name I want to give you today is Silence Ender. A silence ender is someone whose life marks the conclusion of a long season in which the deepest truths about their identity, their purpose, and their calling were suppressed, muffled, or simply never spoken into existence by anyone around them. Silence is not always the absence of sound. Sometimes silence is the presence of the wrong words for too long. The words that said you were ordinary when you were not. Words that said be realistic when your reality was simply operating on a frequency that the people around you had not yet learned to hear. The words that said wait a little longer when what you actually needed was someone to stand beside you and say the waiting is over and what you carry is real and the world needs what is inside you. A silence ender is the person in whom all of that suppression finally meets its end, not through anger, not through the need to prove something to the people who underestimated them, but through the simple, irreversible act of stepping fully into the voice that was always there, always forming, always gathering strength beneath the surface of the silence that tried to contain it. When a silence ender speaks, things change. Not because their voice is the loudest in the room, but because it carries the particular authority that only comes from having been refined in a long season of being unheard. There is a texture to a voice that has been through what yours has been through. A depth, a resonance, a capacity to reach the places in other people that the louder, easier, less tested voices cannot access. When you finally speak from the fullness of who you are and what you have been through, you will reach people who have been waiting for exactly your frequency. People who could not receive what others were saying because it did not carry the particular signature of someone who has survived what they are surviving. You are not just a person finding their voice. You are a voice that will end the silence for others who do not yet have the words for what they are carrying. That is who you are. That is what these years of being unheard were producing. Not just a person who finally gets to speak. A person whose speaking carries liberation for those who hear it. A silence ender does not arrive with noise. They arrive with truth. And truth, spoken in the right voice at the right moment, does not need volume to change everything in the room. I want to guide you through a brief exercise now. Not a complicated one. Just a moment of intentional vision. I want you to find a comfortable position, and if you can, close your eyes after I describe the scene so that you can step into it with your full imagination. Picture yourself standing at a threshold. It is a doorway, wide and solid, with warm light coming through the opening ahead of you. Behind you is a landscape you recognize. It is the terrain of the season you have been in. You can see it clearly if you turn to look. The long stretches of silence that felt like abandonment. The nights you sat alone holding questions that had no audible answer. The moments when you opened your mouth to speak the truest thing about yourself and felt the words dissolve before they reached the surface. The times you swallowed your own vision because the room did not feel safe enough to hold it. The version of you that entered this season, carrying more than you should have had to carry alone, moving through a landscape that offered you very little in the way of mirrors that showed you who you actually were. You can see all of it from where you are standing now. And from this vantage point, something becomes visible that was completely invisible when you were inside it. You can see the formation that was happening in the silence. You can see how the years of being unheard were building in you a capacity for listening that will make you extraordinary in your purpose. You can see how the seasons of having no one speak life over you were teaching you to become someone who speaks life over others with a precision and a tenderness that only comes from knowing what it feels like to go without it. You can see that the silence was not empty. It was a womb, and what was being gestated in it was the fullness of your voice. Now turn back toward the threshold. Look at the light coming through the opening ahead of you. You do not need to see everything that is on the other side. You do not need the complete picture before you take the first step. What you need to see, and what I want you to let yourself see right now, is that the door is open, completely open. It has been open longer than you realized. And the only thing that has been keeping you at the threshold rather than through it has been the final completion of everything the silent season needed to produce in you. That production is finished. The voice that was always inside you has been fully formed. The silence that tried to contain it has reached the end of its assignment. And what comes next is not more waiting. What comes next is the speaking, the stepping forward, the full and unapologetic emergence of the person the silence was always preparing. Take a breath. Feel the ground beneath your feet. Feel the warmth of the light that is already reaching you from the other side of the threshold you are standing at. And know that where you are standing right now is not the waiting room. It is the doorway. And doorways are not for standing in indefinitely. They are for walking through. Before I release you into the next part of this message, I want to speak a few words of blessing over you. Not formal words. Not language designed to sound significant from a distance. Just true words, personal words, spoken from one human being to another across whatever distance exists between where this was written and where you are receiving it. May the voice that has been forming in you through the silence find its first full expression this week in a moment you were not expecting. May the people who need to hear what you carry be positioned in front of you before you have had time to overthink what you are going to say. May the inner frequency that the genius wave has begun to restore in you continue to open, day by day, until operating at your full capacity feels not like an achievement but like coming home. May the weight of the silence that you have carried for so long lift from your shoulders as you step through the threshold, so that what you have been carrying as a burden becomes simply the story that gives your voice its depth and its authority and its reach. May the name Silence Ender settle into you not as a pressure to perform, but as a permission to be fully present. Permission to speak when the room goes quiet, and everyone is waiting for someone who has actually been through something to say the true thing. Permission to take up the space you were always meant to occupy. Permission to let your breakthrough be visible, not for the sake of recognition, but because visible breakthroughs give other people in silent seasons the evidence they need to keep going. You are a silence ender, and the silence ends here, in this moment with you. You have been given a great deal in this message. You have been given language for what you have been living. You have been given a framework for the season you are coming out of. You have been given a name for who you are becoming. And now I want to give you something that connects all of it to the ground beneath your feet. Because chosen ones, silence enders, people who have been through the wilderness and are standing at the threshold of what is next, they do not just need inspiration. They need direction. They need something they can actually do today, in the ordinary hours of this ordinary day, that begins to move them from the threshold into the territory on the other side of it. So let me be specific. Let me talk about 3 domains of your life that are preparing to shift. And let me tell you not just what is coming, but what you can do right now to position yourself to receive it fully. The first domain is your relationships. And the practical action I want to invite you into here is one of honest inventory, not a painful audit, not a session of judgment or criticism toward yourself or anyone else. Just a quiet, honest look at the relational landscape of your life as it currently exists. Who in your life consistently makes you feel more like yourself after spending time with them, and who consistently makes you feel like a smaller or more apologetic version of yourself? Who speaks to the person you are becoming, and who only relates to the person you have been? Who has the capacity to hold the full weight of your vision without flinching or shrinking it, and who, despite their genuine love for you, simply cannot go where you are going? This inventory is not a list of people to remove from your life. It is a map of where your relational energy is currently being invested, and whether that investment is aligned with the season you are entering. Because here is what is true about the relational shift that is coming. New people are going to appear. People who carry assignment-level alignment with where you are going. People who will recognize something in you before you have had a chance to introduce yourself properly. People who will speak to your future rather than only to your history. But those people cannot find their way to you if every available space in your life is already occupied by connections that have completed their season. The relational inventory is not about endings. It is about creating space. Space for the connections that are already moving toward you to have somewhere to land when they arrive. One practical step you can take today is to identify one person in your current life who consistently speaks to the highest version of you, who sees what you are becoming rather than only what you have been, and reach out to them this week. Not with an agenda, not with a request, just with presence, just with the acknowledgement that they matter to you and that their voice in your life has been one of the things that has kept the thread of belief alive through the hard season. Chosen ones need witnesses, people who have seen the wilderness season and have still believed in the destination. Honor the witnesses who have been faithful to that role, and then stay open to the new ones who are coming. The second domain is your purpose, and I want to address something specific here that chosen ones in a transitional season often struggle with. The question of what to do next can feel enormous. It can feel like the answer needs to be a complete and fully formed plan, a vision statement and a 5-year strategy, and a clear sense of every step between here and the fulfillment of the calling. And the absence of that complete picture can become a reason to stay still, to keep waiting, to tell yourself that you will move when you can see further than you currently can. But purpose does not reveal itself in complete pictures. It reveals itself in single steps. And the single step that is available to you right now, today, in the life you are already living, is always enough to begin. So here is the practical invitation for the domain of purpose. Identify the smallest possible version of the thing you believe you are called to do, and do one expression of it this week. Not the full vision, not the finished product, not the version that requires everything to be in place and everyone to be on board and all the resources to be available. The smallest possible version. If you believe you are called to teach one person one thing this week. If you believe you are called to create one small thing this week without waiting until it is ready to be seen. If you believe you are called to lead, make one decision this week from the posture of a leader rather than a follower of your own life. The smallest step in the right direction is infinitely more powerful than the most elaborate plan that stays in your head. Purpose activates through movement, and movement begins with one step, however small, however imperfect, however invisible to everyone but you. The gift of the clarity that has been forming in you through this season is not a plan. It is a direction, and a direction is all you need to take the next step. Trust the direction. Take the step. The next one will become visible when you need it and not before. The third domain is your resources, and I want to speak to this one carefully, because the shift that is coming in this area requires a particular kind of inner repositioning that most people skip over in their excitement about what is coming. The resource shift that chosen ones experience when they move from the wilderness season into the appointed time is not simply a matter of more money or more opportunity appearing. It is a matter of capacity, of being able to receive what arrives without immediately sabotaging it through old patterns of scarcity thinking, of unworthiness, of the deep-seated belief that abundance is for other people but not quite for someone like you. The practical work in this domain is internal before it is external. It begins with identifying the specific story you have been telling yourself about what you deserve and what is available to you. That story was written in the wilderness. It was shaped by the years of striving and not receiving, of working hard and watching the results fall short, of needing things and having to go without them long enough that going without began to feel like your natural state. That story served a protective function during the season when it was formed, but it will not serve you in the season you are entering. And the practical work of releasing it begins with noticing it. Noticing the moment when an opportunity presents itself, and your first internal response is not excitement but suspicion. Noticing the moment when someone offers you something generous, and your first impulse is to minimize it or deflect it, or find a reason why it probably will not last. Noticing the moment when abundance begins to appear at the edges of your life, and a part of you moves to explain it away before you have allowed yourself to fully receive it. When you notice those moments, I want you to practice one simple response. Instead of following the old story, pause, take a breath, and say internally or out loud, I am allowed to receive this. I was made for this. This is mine. Not with arrogance, not with grasping, but with the settled confidence of someone who knows that the appointed time has arrived and that what is being offered in this season was prepared specifically for them and does not need to be earned all over again from scratch. This is also the season to return daily to the 7-minute stillness practice I introduced earlier in this message, and specifically to use the Genius Wave audio as the vehicle for that practice. Because what the theta gamma activation that the Genius Wave produces does in the brain is not separate from what we have been talking about in the domain of resources. A brain that is operating in a suppressed, stressed, beta state will default to scarcity thinking almost automatically. It will contract in the presence of opportunity rather than expanding to meet it. It will find reasons why things will not work rather than pathways for why they will. But a brain that has been guided back into its natural theta gamma frequency, the frequency of chosen ones, the frequency that Dr. James Rivers spent more than 30 years learning how to restore, that brain approaches the same circumstances with a fundamentally different orientation. It sees possibility where the stressed brain sees risk. It finds creative solutions where the depleted brain finds only obstacles. It receives what is being offered with openness rather than deflecting it with the old story of unworthiness. 7 minutes a day. That is the investment. That is the practice that bridges the spiritual truth of what this message has been speaking over you with the neurological reality of what your brain needs in order to operate in alignment with that truth. The link in the pinned comment below will take you directly to the Genius Wave at the price that is available right now. $39 with a 90-day money-back guarantee through the only authorized source I trust you to purchase from. If your spirit has been saying yes throughout this message, if something in you has been recognizing itself in what has been spoken, then the practical next step in the domain of resources is simply to take the step. To say yes to the tool that was designed for exactly the season you are entering. To stop waiting for everything to be perfectly aligned before you begin, and to begin with the one thing that is available to you right now. You know what the next step is. You have known it for a while. The only question that remains is whether you are going to take it. There is something I want to say to you before this message ends, and I want to say it slowly and carefully because it matters more than almost anything else I have said in the time we have been together. I want to say thank you, not a formal thank you, not the kind that gets spoken out of politeness or habit, a real one. The kind that comes from genuinely understanding what it cost you to show up here today. Because showing up was not nothing. There is a version of you that could have scrolled past this. There is a version of you that was too tired, too skeptical, too protected by the armor of disappointment to stop and listen to something that required you to feel things you have been carefully managing for a long time. That version of you would have been completely understandable. Nobody would have blamed you for it. After everything you have been through, after the years of holding on and the nights of wondering and the mornings of getting up and doing it again, without any visible evidence that it was making a difference, you would have had every right to keep your guard up and keep moving and not let any of this in. But you stayed. You stayed through the parts that named the grief. You stayed through the parts that required you to sit with the cost of the waiting rather than rushing past it to the comfort of the resolution. You stayed through the ancient language and the neuroscience and the practical steps and the exercise of standing at the threshold and looking back at the terrain of the season you have been in. You stayed through all of it, and that staying is itself a statement. It is your spirit saying yes before your mind had fully decided. It is the part of you that has always known who you are refusing, one more time, to let the noise of what has not yet happened drown out the signal of what has always been true. I want you to know something. All across the world right now, in time zones and languages and circumstances that are completely different from yours, other chosen ones are receiving this exact same message. Other silence enders are standing at their own thresholds, feeling the same convergence you are feeling, recognizing the same signs you have recognized, choosing the same yes that you are choosing right now. You are not alone in this. You have never been alone in this. The isolation of the wilderness season was specific and purposeful, and it is over. And what comes next, the chapter you are stepping into, you will not walk through it the way you walked through the last one. You will walk through it accompanied. You will walk through it with the community that is assembling itself around your life even now, with the connections that are moving toward you, with the witnesses who are being positioned to stand beside you as the appointed time unfolds. I want to invite you into one final exercise before I release you from this message. I want you to picture yourself holding something. It does not have to be a specific object, just a weight, something that represents the accumulated heaviness of the season you are coming out of, the unanswered questions, the grief of what the waiting cost you, the self-doubt that settled in during the long years of silence, the fear that you had somehow missed your moment or misheard your calling, or been too slow or too broken or too much, or not enough to receive what you had been believing for. Picture all of that gathered into something you are holding in your hands right now. And now I want you to picture a threshold, the same one from earlier, wide and solid with warm light coming through it. And right at the base of that threshold, right on the near side of it where you are still standing, there is a place to set things down, a designated place, a place that was put there specifically for this moment, for this transition, for the person who has been carrying these things for as long as you have and is finally ready to enter the next chapter without them. Set it down, not because the pain was not real, not because the losses did not matter, not because you are pretending that the hard season did not cost you what it cost you, but because you are not going to need to carry it where you are going. The weight served its purpose. It shaped you. It formed you. It built into you the depth and the authority and the compassion and the resonance that your purpose requires. But its work is done now, and you are allowed to leave it at the threshold. You are allowed to walk through with empty hands, ready to receive what the other side has been holding for you. Set it down, take a breath, and walk through. This message will always be here if you need to come back to it. But I hope that what you take with you when you leave is not just the memory of words. I hope you take the settled sense in your chest that something has shifted, that the naming of your season and the honoring of your pain and the reframing of your waiting and the declaration of your identity as a silent ender have moved something in you that needed to be moved. And I hope that the next time you sit down in 7 minutes of intentional stillness, whether through the genius wave or simply through the practice of quiet, you will feel the difference between the person who entered this message and the person who is leaving it. Before you go, I want to ask one thing, not for me, for the chosen one who is going to wake up tomorrow morning and walk into their week without anyone to name what they are carrying. The one who is in the middle of the wilderness season without a message like this one to tell them what the wilderness is for. If this message met you somewhere real today, if it landed in a place that needed it, share it, like it, pass it forward, not as a favor to an algorithm, as an act of service to another human being who is carrying what you were carrying before this message found you. Your one click could be the moment their kairos arrives. And if the genius wave met you somewhere in the middle of all of this, if something in you said yes to the idea of restoring the frequency that was always yours, it is waiting for you in the pinned comment below. $39, 90-day guarantee, the only link I trust. It will be there when you are ready. Go well, go forward. Go as the silence ender you have always been becoming. There is a phrase that chosen ones sometimes say to each other when they recognize what the other has been through. They do not say congratulations, because congratulations belongs to moments of easy arrival. They say, I see you. They say, I know what that cost. They say you made it, and I am not surprised, because something in you was always going to make it. So that is what I want to leave you with. Not more information. Not another framework or concept or invitation. Just this. I see you. I see the years you spent in rooms that could not hold the fullness of who you were. I see the nights you stayed faithful when faithfulness felt like the most expensive thing you owned. I see the dreams you kept alive in the quiet when the noise of your circumstances argued against them every single day. I see the version of you that showed up here today, a little worn perhaps, a little more careful than you used to be, but still here, still open, still reaching for the thing that was placed in you before you were born and has never stopped being true about you no matter what any season has said to the contrary. You are seen. You are known. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not too late. You are a silence ender standing at an open door in the fullness of your Kairos moment, and the light on the other side of that threshold has been waiting for exactly you in exactly this form at exactly this time. Walk forward. The world needs what you are carrying, and you are finally completely ready to give it.